few hours ago, two top Republicans came to Trump's defense in a rare joint statement. House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell called on Vice President Harris today to end what they call dangerous rhetoric against Donald Trump, saying in part, quote, "The vice president's words more closely resemble those of President Trump's second would-be assassin than her own earlier appeal to civility. Labeling a political opponent as a fascist risks inviting yet another would-be assassin to try robbing voters of their choice before Election Day." Okay, so the two Republican leaders expressing concern about Kamala Harris calling Donald Trump a fascist. Let's show an example of Harris doing exactly what McConnell and Johnson are taking issue with.
She's a Marxist, communist, fascist, socialist.
I'm sorry, the control room, that was actually Donald Trump calling Kamala Harris a fascist in September. Control room, are you ready? Please run the clip of Kamala Harris calling Donald Trump a fascist, which offended the Republican leaders.
Somebody's got to explain this to him. This is a radical left, Marxist, communist, fascist.
Okay, again, I'm sorry. That was Trump calling Harris a fascist. I apologize. Control room, can we get it together? Johnson and McConnell are very upset that Kamala Harris called Donald Trump a fascist. Please roll the clip.
We have a fascist person running who's incompetent, and we have a president who's not even around.
Guys, I'm trying to show the clip of Donald Trump being called a fascist. That's what Speaker Johnson and Leader McConnell are really worried about. And you keep running different clips of Trump calling her a fascist. Please, humor me. Humor me.
Authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
Okay, so that was Donald Trump being called a fascist, but not by Kamala Harris. That is retired Marine General John Kelly, Trump's longest-serving chief of staff, coming to the conclusion that Donald Trump is a fascist in his view. Guys, she did say this. She said it here on CNN. Don't you have a clip from CNN? "We have got to stop him," Milley said. "You have got to stop him." By you, he meant the press broadly. Quote, "He is the most dangerous person ever. I had suspicions when I talked to you about his mental decline and so forth, but now I realize he's a total fascist." Okay, so that was from CNN, but that was me reading a quote from former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Mark Milley, who Trump appointed. Milley calling Trump a fascist in an interview with Bob Woodward. That wasn't Harris calling him a fascist. Control room, come on. I know we have this clip somewhere from CNN. Come on, show it.
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Thank you. My control room going a little bit rogue there and making a point, perhaps. This is obviously what Mike Johnson and Mitch McConnell are worried about Kamala Harris, agreeing with the words of some of the people who have worked closely with Trump in the Oval Office in the Situation Room. That's what they have an issue with, not Trump using these very same words. CNN's Rosa Flores is with the Harris campaign in Houston ahead of the big rally there tonight, and Elena Treen is with the Trump campaign in Traverse City, Michigan, ahead of the rally. Elena, what did we hear from Trump? He went to Austin earlier this afternoon. He was talking a lot about immigration.
He was, and I'll say this. I mean, during those remarks in Austin, he said the reason he came to Texas was because he knew that Kamala Harris was going to be there. But I can tell you, Jake, from my conversations with Trump's advisors, he was already planning to go there to tape that podcast with Joe Rogan. And that was a big part of this big trip today. They scheduled those remarks later. So I just leave you with that. But look, a lot of his remarks today obviously focused on the border, one of his top issues. And as we've seen over the last several weeks now, Donald Trump has continued to really lean into inflammatory rhetoric and really demeaning language about immigrants. He repeated a line that he actually first stated yesterday in Arizona, where he likened undocumented immigrants to trash. He said that America was a dumping ground for the world, calling it a garbage can, and then went on to say that perhaps Kamala Harris should be disqualified from running because of her handling of the border. Take a listen to how he put it.
They're letting their people out of jails and bringing them right into our country. We're like a dumping ground. What Kamala Harris has done on our border is cruel, it's vile, and it's absolutely heartless. Her policy of importing migrant gangs is a crime against our country. It's actually a crime against humanity, and her abolition of our border should disqualify her for even running.
So first of all, Jake, the Biden administration and Kamala Harris are not trying to import gangs into our country. But all to put aside, this is language we have heard from Donald Trump in the past. Remember, we've heard him argue that undocumented migrants are poisoning the blood of the country, language that people have said likens back to language used by Adolf Hitler. He's talked about, arguing that they are criminals and rapists and other horrible things about migrants. We've heard this before, but I think to put this into context, why is he doing this? Why is he leaning in so heavily to this? It's because he thinks it's working. He tells his advisors he thinks this helped him get elected in 2016, that type of rhetoric, and he thinks it will help him again. And to argue that point, they say, look at the polling. He is doing better. He is closing the gap. He's doing even better than he has in recent weeks, and that's why he's continuing to use this language. So the question of is he going to stop doing this before Election Day, it's going to be the opposite. I think he's only going to lean in further, and I expect he'll continue some of that language here in Traverse City in just a couple hours.
All right, Rosa, tell us what you're seeing as you wait for the Harris rally in Houston to start. And has the Vice President Harris responded to the joint statement from McConnell and Johnson?
You know, she has taken a statement head on and responding during comments to reporters saying that there is no room for political violence, but that the American people should be presented about the facts when regards to Donald Trump. Take a listen.
We all must speak out against any form of political violence, and I'm very clear about that. No one should be the subject of violence, much less political violence. But the American people deserve to be presented with facts and the truth. And the fact and the truth is that some of the people closest to Donald Trump when he was president, generals, including most recently John Kelly, a 4-star Marine general, have been very clear about the danger and the threat that Donald Trump poses to America.
And about here in Houston and what's happening, take a look behind me. There is a lot of energy, a lot going on here as lots of people are in line waiting to see both Vice President Kamala Harris and Beyonce. So there is star power here, and also we're expected to hear a lot of very powerful stories, Jake. We're expecting that Kamala Harris will be joined by several women, including Amanda Zarowski. She's a Texas woman who was not able to gain an abortion, and she almost died. And really, at the end of the day, what Kamala Harris said earlier today is that Texas is ground zero for the abortion issue, and that is what she hopes that takes people to the polls.
All right,
Jake,
Elena
back to
Treen
you.
and Rosa Flores, thanks to both of our panels here. Brian, what is your response to this disagreement about rhetoric?
You know, listen, the rhetoric gets hot, but I remind people, when we talk about what is fascism, fascism is wanting to pack the court, extend it beyond where it is now. Fascism is wanting to censor people who have criticisms about their government. Fascism is actually wanting to get rid of the filibuster. So when we're looking at issues of what are fascist activities as opposed to what are fascist rhetoric, the rhetoric gets hot. We all understand that. There's been a president who's had 2 assassination attempts, so I certainly see the concern of Speaker McConnell of President McConnell and Speaker Johnson. But the rhetoric does get hot. But let's be clear, the fascist actions that are taking place in this campaign are the result of Democratic policies, not Republican policies.
Karen?
Yeah, okay. So obviously I disagree, and I think then you just stated.
Shocked. That's why we have you here
exactly.
to debate.
Look,
Yes.
I'll point to a New York Times piece earlier this week by Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman, and what they did is they went through everything Trump has said he wants to do. And I think most people don't really know what fascism is, but I'll tell you what it points out. Donald Trump has talked about consolidating power in the executive branch so that he could use the levers of government for his own agenda, for his retribution agenda, for revenge, and to give people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, who is a coward by stopping an endorsement that the Washington Post was going to run of Kamala Harris, they would get big tax breaks under him. He's not talking about the American people. I think that's where we need to be having the conversation. And I think we need to remind people when we're talking about throwing around these concepts about fascism, We're talking about how a leader would govern and whether or not that person is going to focus on you and your issues, which you do not hear from Donald Trump, versus Kamala Harris, who today is going to be talking about the basic freedom of women to control our own bodies. And frankly, the men who love women and men who care about our lives and our freedom.